really gives people the opportunity to address conditions that they may not even know that they're at the beginning of having.
And then as the cost will inevitably go down, then you would just have it in your house. Like you would have a sauna or a hot tub. You have these things that you're buying.
It's a smart bathtub.
Smart bathtub. Go sit in it, scan. Yeah, every day.
I mean, it's like the thing that Luke Skywalker sits in Empire Strikes Back. Welcome to the Radial Podcast, episode 12. I'm here with Mike Canzoneri, Dan Magnuszewski, and Nicholas Barone, the leadership team here at Radial. Today, we are discussing AI and how it's leaving the chat box, whether we're seeing it in medical devices or infrastructure that just works behind the scenes. We want to get into all the things AI and how we're seeing it emerge in the world today. I mean, for the last 2 years, we've talked to AI in chat, type something in, get something out. Is this the way? Is this all we're seeing? I mean, well, how do we see this in a company, Mike? What are they doing? They're not just constantly having all their employees talk into the chat and get the chat out. When does this thing become agentic and not just one way in, one way out?
Yeah. So when we go and talk to companies today, we're seeing a few things that are different than like 4 or 6 months ago, right? So 4 or 6 months ago, there was still a lot of question around how things were going to go, whether or not employees should have access, what they should have access to. Now you have a lot of folks lighting up a team account in Claude for their employees, or whether that's an OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever else. They're using Gemini. There seems to be still a lot of people having challenges using Microsoft Copilot, which we hear about a lot, but they're still in the space, right? I don't think many organizations, I think Google's probably the only other one besides Microsoft, is sort of like that built-in distribution because they own the businesses already, right? With G Suite or with Microsoft being on-prem for a lot of folks. So I'm sure we'll see some advancement there, but now people are using it. And you have folks who were either not interested or completely unaware of the features that were available to them. They're being handed this tool. And in most cases, organizations still don't have the trained people to teach them how to use it. Those folks still don't understand the capabilities that they have at their fingertips and what they can do with the integrations that they have. So that's, I think, for a lot of folks who are being handed this tool at work for the first time and told that they can use it now. If they weren't using anything before, they're learning what we were learning when this all started, but they have a much better tool set to start from, of course. If it's someone who has already Claude on their phone and they're running personal ChatGPT or something like that on their phone, now they're able to expand a little bit. So you got that spectrum of, I'm just getting comfortable asking it questions and giving it a little bit of access to my files, maybe a little bit of access to my email. And then the folks who are saying, yay, I can finally do this now. The stuff that I've been doing secretly on my phone and hoping nobody would catch me. Now I can do it in the workplace and sort of start to expand into projects and that. Where that leaves us for most companies is there's still that gap to the central place where everyone can access the AI that represents the workflows of the company, the processes of the company, the agents for the whole company. You're enabling individuals to have that capability themselves. But when I make a sales workflow and I want to give it to everybody, what do I do with that? How do I make that accessible? And so that's a tool that's largely missing from a lot of organizations. It's something that we're building at Radial Agency to try and fill that gap. And there are some emerging startups in that space as well that are just starting to come out of stealth to try and be that central portal for AI for organizations that really wrap up the authorization and the security and start to move folks from operating just in their team account for themselves and into the capability of being able to help their department, help their team, and help their company. Further out from that is when you start to get some cross between different departments. But that's in the future. That's in a little bit of a far future for a lot of folks. Today, it's upskilling individuals for using it in their own job, and then just starting to get that into capabilities that are accessible to the rest of the company for them when they build those tools, whether those are processes or workflows, agents, or just chatbots they want to expose to the rest of the company.
I mean, the chatbot interface is interesting, is like this bottom-up way to collect context of the company, but I don't know if any of these frontier models or tools are doing it. So let's just say everybody goes and gets into Claude every day. So they're chatting about their specific work. can that actually just bubble up into a central brain? Is Claude looking at this, or is this strategy to collect the vast company context to a single repository?
I think all of these companies are trying to work towards that. I think there's some challenges that come along with that. The first one's going to be the fact that most companies are actually working across a lot of these models. They're using Copilot and Gemini and Claude, right? Or they're using ChatGPT and Claude. And so nobody wants to get locked into that one thing. And so there's definitely some challenges there with where is that memory? If Anthropic builds a holistic memory set of features for your company, is that where you want your company's memory to be? Or do you want that to be in some tool that you have in-house that's model agnostic, that you're going to be able to actually control as things move forward in what is one of the most volatile set of features and services that any of us have ever experienced? So that's one part of it. I think there's another part that, to your point around expanding outside of the chatbot and that text box, is the rest of the artifacts that make up a company. If you have old documentation sitting around, manuals that are still on paper, spreadsheets, proposals, sales documents, and contracts, those are all things that really make up your company's context. We're finding that a lot of folks definitely don't want to put that stuff up into Claude. For some folks, it's already in Google, which is one of Google's advantages. And that's the same for Microsoft, right? Microsoft already has a lot of those documents within their infrastructure, so it makes a lot of sense for them to try and layer on. But for folks who don't already have that, or for folks where a lot of that content is still in paper, we deal with a lot of companies around our city where they've got 30 years of design documents and proposals, support documentation, and it's in paper still because they're working with old equipment, or they're working with stuff that just lasts a really long time. And so digitizing that material, then getting into something that can then be used for proposals, can be used to help a support person work with a piece of equipment that's 35 years old and needs to have a part replaced. Like those are where you're starting to really get outside of the chat box. And that's sort of that first class of problems that emerges right after that. When we talk about where things expand beyond the text box, it's going to be what is that additional context that I can give somebody to actually help them have access to more information, but then start to build the agents on top of it.
And that's the hardest part, is getting all of that. It's a bit of a data engineering chore to have to go do. But I think a lot of people kind of dabbled in different demos and projects and stuff. And then if you want to actually scale it up to across the company and you're an older legacy company, how are you getting all that data together? And bigger companies are going to have the governance concerns and who can see what data and what data is feeding what model. And you run into these kind of more enterprisey issues as opposed to a startup or small company that's always been in Google or all their data's kind of right there, or you can just YOLO all your stuff in the Claude and start working off of it. You lose that when you have big companies that are required to potentially keep that offline or not share it or just go through the regular governance process that you have at these big companies. And that's going to obviously slow things down.
Yeah, it's the physical artifact. We've been talking a lot or thinking a lot about physical artifacts, whether it's an old car manual or our family history, right? The amount of physical artifacts in these organizations, how do they begin to even transition into a space, right, into the digital, so that they can be processed and brought into the context?
Yeah, I think that scanning companies and visualization type plays are pretty interesting now because of that, right? There may not have been a huge benefit to spending the money and time doing that in the past, but now it's almost a requirement having that data. You can't leverage AI within your company fully if you're not digitizing all those artifacts, which is tough.
Jonathan, you didn't bring this up directly, but I think it's worth mentioning. You hear a lot in the news about AI replacing jobs, and every single company we've gone into so far to talk about AI transformation within their company, it's not about replacing people's jobs or reducing headcount. Every conversation we've had so far is about enabling people and upskilling them, giving them more capabilities, because hiring people is hard. It's a lot to think about letting go of somebody who is familiar with your company's process, the products, the industry, and the market. But there's a lot of investment of time and energy that goes into that. Employers are not as willing to just let that go as you might infer from just listening to mainstream media and reading about this in the news. What they really want to know is, how can I upskill their abilities because we're going to grow 10 or 15 or 20%. And I want them to be able to do more with these tools and expand their scope within my company, not get rid of them. And I think we're going to continue to see more and more of that as companies can do more and they can win more deals and they can get more effective proposals out that are better on pricing, but also better on margin. That means that those companies are going to have the advantages that they've always wanted to have, and maybe not increase in headcount as much, but not look to do mass reductions either.
A lot of the AI, we're removing whatever percent of the company based on AI efficiencies and all that, is really, I think, just these companies who overhired over COVID. There was that big push even prior to COVID, right? More the zero interest reality that was there, and really VCs and others that were just pushing to hire every data scientist, engineer, machine learning engineer. And it was just hire them and we'll figure out what to do with them, because it's an arms race and you want to stockpile. And that's what they were told. I remember being in that spot. So now you're in a position where market's tightening and maybe you didn't need to hire those 2,000 engineers that you just hired because you were trying to hoard them all, right? And it's easy to blame AI and not that you overhired. And so, yeah, I think that's a lot of it. And people I'm talking to they're looking at hiring more software engineers and people who are able to, or even more the forward deployed engineer type person that can go out and build stuff and be efficient, and companies are looking for that. So yeah, it's definitely a different narrative on AI's taking your job, right? I've talked with some CEOs and stuff, but there are folks who are trying to figure out how they can protect their people as well. So I had that conversation, and person was saying, how can we make that company and the people make that transition and upskill and all this other stuff? Because the deck is going to get shuffled, but how do you help bring those people along? Because doing that will just make the company way more efficient and way more potentially profitable. So yeah, I think there's an interesting difference between mainstream media headlines and what people are actually doing and what people are trying to figure out.
For sure. I mean, we see this even personally, right? You go on Twitter or X and, people are generating tens of thousands of revenue with a month with one person and all these agentic workflows. And as soon as you get your hands into the tool, you realize where there's error there, and there's still a lot of human effort to stitch these workflows together. Bringing us back to physical artifacts. We've been toying around with this way to bring to life our family history. And we kind of talked internally, like we all have that box of photos and letters and stuff in our basement. You hear the sound bites at Thanksgiving dinner. Grandpa used to work at the Ford factory. And that's where it ends, right? And we've been toying with this concept, like, how do you bring this to life? But very quickly did we learn the friction of bringing the physical artifact into the digital realm to make something really kind of emotionally powerful. And Nicholas, you went through this, right? You've talked to family members about, hey, do you have this stuff from grandpa or great grandpa? Like, and how do I get it? And what was your process like to kind of bring that content into the physical world? Is it just you over top of it with your phone snapping images, or what did you do?
I have another box right here of stuff I'm going to digitize next. The initial version was just taking pictures over a white desk, and I let sort of the tools figure out the rest. So took 150 photos. I didn't even really straighten them or anything. I had some negatives. I asked Claude to reverse them, turn those into, like, do an inverse on them and turn them into non-negatives. There's definitely friction there, but it worked. It worked well enough, and my stuff worked well enough. I think the human component was the taste component of what's the narrative you want me to craft. So, like, I think that's a core part of this, is that you look at these artifacts, and this really applies to work and business just as much as a personal family member. But, like, what is that narrative that you want to craft, and, like, then guide it towards that outcome. So in the first case, it was all World War II artifacts. Tell me about my grandfather's experience in World War II. My other grandfather, who's in this folder, which is really weird to say, but it has World War II artifacts, but it also has, like, his birth certificate from Italy, and basically, like, his whole life is in here. So that's going to be more of a timeline driven experience. And that just comes back to the person creating it having some say, right? Like in like a medium is the message sort of angle of like, well, the content I have here is different, so I have to craft something different for that. Doubling all the way back to like chat interfaces and doing this stuff. I do think that what we're doing isn't the chat interface is just us interacting with the computer. I don't really think of work as being the chat interface. And I don't think that businesses, every time I hear about a company where they're like, yeah, you can chat with documents now in the company, I just roll my eyes as like, does anyone really care about that or want to do that? Like it's an interactive modality that someone will use to interact with computer and content, but it's always back to workflows. So like, what is the workflow someone does? How do you put AI like reasoning or analysis to then create an output that then the human checks and approves or adjusts or iterates on? And that's no different than like in the historical text stuff that we've been doing. It's like, write the narrative of my grandfather. Let me review it. Okay, there's some errors here. Let's fix it. So I do think that that's what work should look like too. And that's what we're starting to see about around like document the workflow, figure out what the next step is. Okay, where does an AI analysis make sense? Drop that in. And that's the actual work or thing we're building after we've documented that workflow.
I like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
I mean,
talk to
I
the
think
Dan.
I think the interesting part too is the AI does a really good job of connecting the dots and potentially taking these types of projects, and this one specifically, connecting the dots and helping draw together that larger story that may have taken, an actual writer, journalist, whatever, who knows how much time to go and do that and try to draw it all out and understand what connects, or this one little line here where he mentioned this thing that actually ties in with some other world event that you may not have known of, right? I think that's the part where it makes it really efficient, but there still is the taste component, right? Where the humans are going to kind of build that differentiator, and how are you crafting, how's that story coming across, and what aspects do you need to add more or less of? It's definitely interesting and a really good use case for AI. And
So the human really becomes the thing that shapes the content into the machine. It's not as simple as just taking artifacts, whether it's business or personal life, right? And uploading it to a folder. It's the order of those things. It's what you know about those things that you're uploading, and then massaging that and processing the content to a place that it is valuable, right? That's really interesting because again, you think just upload it and AI is going to make this something neat and of value. But it's really not that. Like when you went through the process of your family's history and uploading it, you talked to me about, you really had to nudge it here or miss something there. And once you repointed it, it actually went and found it and did much better. But the process of just kind of like forcing that into the shape that you wanted it to be was a lot of the work before you said, okay, go produce me this artifact.
yeah, different OCR tech. It's really around, there were certain pages that I had that I assumed, right? And this is where you have to really babysit it, is there was just typed memoir stuff and it thought the one page was blank, and it didn't read it, didn't OCR it. And it wasn't until I was kind of reading it and then I started seeing some areas that were missed, and I would ask, what about going to work on the Alaskan Railroad, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that never happened. I have no information about that. Had to go back, and it's like, oh, let me rerun it again. And okay, I can read it now. So you run into some of those weird issues that maybe we assume is a solved problem and the computer is going to be perfect and it's always going to be good. But yeah, I mean, there's still is that need to ensure it's not thinking it's doing the right thing and telling you it's doing the right thing when it's not. A lot of hand holding, a lot of babysitting. And then, yeah, it's still crafting it in the way that you like, as though you're helping to coach a writer or whoever is working on it. You have to do that and guide it. At the end of the day, the AI is still a tool. And so we're just using that tool to get where we want to go, but still requires the human to move it in the right direction.
At an organization bringing their physical artifacts to digital, is that a new role, or is it the subject matter expert? Like, what are you seeing, Mike, as you go into these organizations? Are they prepared for this level of processing before they see value? And are their expectations set properly as they begin their journey in AI?
Is anyone prepared for this? I think they're working on getting prepared. For companies that have a lot of, and keep in mind, like the type of companies we're talking about are companies that have been around for 40 years, 80 years, over 100 years. There's a lot of legacy there. There's a lot of history. And it sounds silly to think that we have these physical manuals or we have these physical drawings and they're not digital yet, but that's the reality of doing actual work that produces physical things in the real world. It's been sufficient so far to have those things be available on paper. And it was okay that they weren't in the computer. It's okay that we were just making the new things in the computer. And now, if you want to utilize these AI tools, now you have to actually get it in there. So they're beginning to take those steps now to make that happen. We're at the beginning of that. So they're ready to do it and they want to, for sure. Are they prepared to? Well, we're going to find out.
Well, I think there's also a conversation to have around, you have 80 years of data or documents and things like that. The reality is you probably don't need all 80 years of it.
Oh, of course.
In order to, right? And so,
certainly. Yeah.
So it's more of for some of these things, it may seem too daunting and cost too much or take too much time to do that because they're looking at, well, we have 80 years of stuff we need to bring in. When the reality is you maybe only need the last 15 years in order
100%.
for any of that to be relevant, to make sense. As long as you're not going back and asking historical questions, it's really like, what do you need to build that context based on what how the business is and acts and behaves today?
For sure. I think we see it less so around orders, and we're seeing it more around this piece of equipment is 50 years old and now we need to fix something inside of it. And no one's around who really worked on it. And so we have these manuals, and how can we do that? Or we need to build a part. We had these parts for 25 years. Now we're out of them and we need to build some new ones, right? And those plans are 35 years old. That tends to be where we see those ones where you go really far back. You're 100% correct though. When you start to talk about orders, you start to talk about proposals, RFPs, RFQs, whatever the case may be. Generally speaking, in the last 3 to 5 years, get you enough data, and that stuff's already digital, generally.
So speaking of making physical digital, you guys saw the Midjourney medical scanner that came out. I think it was last week or the week before, where you effectively stand in a pool of liquid and then it takes millions of images around you, kind of as an alternative to an MRI, right? Taking the physical, making it digital, so you could leverage the data you get out of it for some beneficial outcome. Now, Dan, you did this kind of, right? You did the full body. Is it an MRI?
Yeah.
And what was that experience like in kind of that technology?
It was actually lovely. You lay in a tube and they put Seinfeld on, and I watched 2.5 episodes. It was lovely. But yeah, I mean,
Were you pinned down? When I had an MRI, it was the most miserable. It was like the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, if you're claustrophobic, it may not be your jam, but
not be. I mean, you have like a 2-ton machine over your head. It's like this close, and they're just playing classical music. Like that's going to relax me.
Yeah, no, you got to watch Seinfeld. That's the beauty.
That wasn't an option, so I'll have to find a better place for that.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, it is an interesting experience, and it is classic kind of MRI noises and hold your breath and do this and that. But getting that data is super interesting. And this company is going and taking that data, and how do you track progress and changes in the body, and being able to do that, it kind of gives this physical thing that is our bodies that we generally don't try to understand and map out everything like we would in any other system. You build software systems and you have your architecture and code, where the code is, and if performance in any of those areas or some standard of deviation off, or if there's a bug, you can go find exactly the line of code, or if it crashes, here's the line of code that caused that, or the piece of infrastructure that caused that. But with our bodies, we don't do that, right? And it's kind of the most important thing in our lives. So I think it is an example of how do we take these things that maybe we couldn't have digitized in the past and leverage these AI tools. In this scenario, it's just trying to spot issues. It's trying to early stage potentially diseases, but also just, how you progress over time and allowing the AI models to try to find different things or give you the confidence that, okay, you're all good and there's nothing to worry about. And we'll see you in a couple of years and make sure nothing does progress, right? I think these kind of things are scanning, digitizing, allowing the AI to try to spot and connect the dots in ways that sometimes a human can't do. And so, yeah, it's really interesting.
Jonathan, what I think is interesting is you think about Dan's experience, right? He had to go, his first one had to fly somewhere. Nowadays, there's more of these machines around. So you got to drive somewhere, make an appointment, you have to lay in the tube for an hour while they fully scan you. And it's a little bit of an event. When we think about what Midjourney's produced, and they're working their way through FDA approval, and they're going to start with some early stage detections and things that can come out of that scan, and they're going to progress into more and more advanced detection capabilities approved by the FDA over time. So they have something that's a little bit unusual for medical device stuff. They can sort of start it on one end and with the same device continue to enhance it and enhance and enhance. The other thing is it's a much shorter experience for the user. They want to put these things in med spas all over the place. You go to the med spa, they drop you in the tank, it scans you, you're in and out in a few minutes. And you're able to build up a long running record now. Instead of getting a scan every 1, 3, 5 years to see how something's progressing, you might get one every few months. And it's low cost enough and it's fast enough that it's just no effort to jump in and get a scan and see how things are doing. The early detection opportunities there are massive. The opportunities to detect the progression of any disease or condition are massive. Increased frequency is really the thing that is a major positive outcome for technology like this. And we're going to see it more and more. Just like wearing a Whoop band or an Oura ring gets you that daily insight into your sleep and how your heart's performing on a daily basis. The more you can detect accurately over time, the sooner you can detect that you have a problem. And now we're just at the very beginning of starting to see the FDA approving various AI capabilities around heart disease and reading EKGs, which was recently announced. And so you're going to see more and more of this stuff, which is fantastic. Better than any doctor can see, more often than any current scan can happen in a cost-effective way. And that really gives people the opportunity to address conditions that they may not even know that they're at the beginning of having.
And then the cost will inevitably go down, then you would just have it in your house, right? Like you would have a sauna or a hot tub. You have these things that you're buying.
It's a smart bathtub.
Smart bathtub, go sit in it, scan. Yeah, every day.
I mean, it's like the thing that Luke Skywalker sits in Empire Strikes Back. Like, just looking at it, I didn't realize this was a real thing when I saw the news story. I thought that it was just like a Midjourney image. I also think that part of this story is also really interesting because Midjourney for us 2 years ago, 3 years ago was the place you'd go to like make cool images to add on your site. So now you have this trained data set that is actually being leveraged. So it's not replacing, I mean, it is maybe replacing photographers and stock photography. That's a different debate, but it's actually being used and leveraged in a completely different space from its original sort of start and thing that we would even pay for is using it in the space of like medical scanning is just wild and fascinating and sort of shows, I think, how important this stuff will be to just like saving people and doing really, really good things that are, again, not just replacing or changing the way we work, which, is already going to happen and is bound to happen anyway. So we should just, figure out what we do next. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing just to see what that outcome looks like. And just the numbers are crazy, like 21 petaflops and how much data it creates and uses. It's going to be wild.
Physical to digital more frequently. I wonder if you think they're going to be going to the consumer route?
Yeah, they want to go into med spas. Will it go in consumer like it's in your shower? I don't know.
No,
it's got to drop you in a water tank because it needs
something more accessible, right? If it becomes more accessible and you could access more frequently,
I mean, you have to do it in water, right? Because it needs the sound wave to go through the water. That's part of the whole thing. Yeah. I guess it's probably.
But the med spa angle is different. That's like FDA approval or not trying to not get FDA approval, right? Because that's going to take years. So in the meantime,
no, I don't think so. No. They're doing it. That's part of the whole thing.
I saw one person on Reddit say that's one. But I mean, either way, like I think it's a great distribution channel because if you're going to a med spa, you're also likely worry about this stuff, and it just seems perfect, to line up.
I'd pay $30, get dunked in the tank, get the scan. Sure. $60.
If it's 21 petaflops of data, you're going to pay more than $30, but maybe
in and out, not forever though. It's 21 petaflops until it renders it out, and then you get the render. That'll be less.
Impression on that. See what the Wiseman score is.
That'll be less than 21 petaflops by a lot.
I mean, I like to see it. You hinted at this, Nicholas, but this company that was just kind of making beautiful images,
Like
for us.
sci-fi images and crazy
Right.
stuff, right?
Like they have obviously been working on this for a long time, and now they have created something that has the opportunity to really impact how long humans live and the understanding of ourselves and diseases. We're continually seeing this trend of moving it out of the chat box and it being part of the world around us that is less visible, but maybe far more powerful. And that it's a fun place to be.
It isn't unprecedented either. As I guess as we talk about it, I'm realizing that medical imaging has often come out of companies like Kodak or consumer photography companies. It isn't that crazy, I guess, when you put it that way and realize historically, like this is where images are being created, and you start with the audience that wants to buy a bunch of film, but over time, like they're also making X-ray machines and all these other components, and that maybe one day turns into their biggest revenue generating line of business. Fujifilm was one of the other ones I was trying to think of. So yeah, I think it isn't as crazy as that first headline I saw like a week or two ago about it. That's very interesting, and it just shows you it's not a straight line. All these companies, what they follow, goes all over the place, and you find the best opportunity as you're going. So that is really interesting.
Good stuff, guys.
What do you think? Is that it? Nice. Thanks, Jonathan.